guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back again with another video. This video is featuring this cute little cupcake set called Be Your Own Kind of Cupcake from Crafty Meraki. I'm also using a sentiment from Crazy Cupid Love that just says Happy Valentine's Day. And then later on, I'm going to use a stencil that is green garland. These are some infinity arches. These are the ones from Hero Arts. I wanted to do kind of like a fun little shape for my mini Valentines, and pretty much what we're going to be concentrating on, there's going to be a lot of coloring, but how to do mini Valentines in bulk that are still unique and aren't going to be boring. So I used to have this problem quite a bit when I first started card making, that I would want to practice things, but I would get very bored. So just some tips on that. So we have a regular sheet of cardstock, 8.5 by 11, and I am going to trim that to 6.5 by the regular, just cut it in half. So it's 6.5. And then I'm going to cut it again so that it is 6.5 by 4.25. And then I'm going to score it at 3.5. So this is going to give me a 4.25 total card, 4.25 by 3.5. And this is just going to fit the arches that I chose. But you could do whatever shape you wanted. This is just going to give me a side folding note card that is going to be in the shape that I want it to be. If you are doing a different shape, basically how I got this math is I measured the width, which would stay the same. I measured the length, which would stay the same. And then I doubled the width. So I knew that the card, in order to comfortably fit my arch, it needed to be 3.25. So I just doubled that so that way I would have some wiggle room for my arch to cut this out. It has very little waste. Out of one sheet, I was able to get 3 folded note cards. And then I'm just scoring them with my bone folder and then making sure that I go in and just really re-secure that fold with the bone folder. So now for the actual die cutting of the arch to make a shaped mini Valentine, I am lining up my arch with the left hand side just hanging over slightly. So the die portion is just hanging over slightly. You can see it here, how it's just hanging off the side of the card. This is going to make sure that it's in the correct shape, but that it doesn't cut through that fold, and that we have a full note card that stays intact. Here, I'm having the problem of I have dark nail polish on and I need to get a corner up on my tape, but I don't want to chip my nail polish, and I also don't want to leave a blue streak on my card. So here is the note card, and then I'm going to do this for all of them. I also cut the top portion, so the outside will act as a frame. The inside portion is just one arch smaller, and that's what I'm going to do all my stamping on. So these do have dies. You could get the dies and, pop them up if you wanted to do that. I do not have the dies, so I'm just stamping them onto my arch so that I can color them. There are 6 different cupcakes in this set. I am coloring all 6 of them today, but that is tip number 1. So if you are looking for a way to make the same style of Valentine without getting bored, find a stamp set that has a lot of options of the same thing. So this one has 6 cupcakes in it, so I will have 6 different mini Valentines, and you can then mix up the colors if you so choose, so that way they're all different. If you need to make multiples, like in my kids class, there's 24 kids, so I would make 4 sets of these. And here you can just see all of the different cupcakes. I think they're all really, really cute. And then at the bottom is where I am going to put my sentiment. If you need ideas for coloring them, they have them. This is one of the great things about Crafty Meraki sets. They are all colored by artists in our industry, and they put them right on the back so that you can see and be inspired by their wonderful coloring. So here I am going to start first by showing you how to color this with just a super neutral cupcake wrapper. I colored mine all of their colors, but you may just want to do white, and you may want to do white for all of them, or like a silver. That would be totally fine. I've chose cool grays for that. So in going and looking at this, we're going to remember our kind of rules of shading, which is any point where two objects meet or any point where one object lays on top of the other, there is going to be some shading. So you will also notice that while I am putting the shading next to the lines, up at the, or down at the bottom, where it's kind of coming up, where it's kind of like rippled and it's coming up, I'm adding shading to that as well. And this is just going to help give it a little bit more shape. For any of my white frosting, I'm using warm grays for that. And the reason is so that there would be a contrast, so that you would see that this was like a silver or a white cupcake wrapper versus, you know, the color of a buttercream, which is not going to be quite as cool for the most part. So anytime you're coloring anything white, we're just adding the shadows. So I'm looking at the shape of this frosting, and I am adding my shadows to where it's kind of curling over itself or where one level is tucked behind another. In addition to that, where there's some rounded parts, I might add a little bit of shading there. And again, that's just to give it a little bit more shape and a little bit more roundness. It would still look super cute if you didn't add those pieces, but this is the way that I color, and that is what I am here to share. For the cupcake itself, I decided to do this one chocolate. And so I've chosen some browns. I like the E50 family in Copics. You can do whatever works for you. We'll also do some vanilla cupcakes later on. For the darkest parts, obviously your frosting is sitting on top of your cupcake. That will cast a shadow. And then where the rippled portion of your cupcake holder is, I just did little dots of my darkest color where it dipped down. And then I went through, added my mid-tone, and then the lightest color will be through the center. For all of my cupcakes, because I do like them to have a little bit of texture, I am going to go in and add what we call stippling. And this is going to create a dotted texture. That's all stippling is just a series of small dots, but it does give the cupcake more of a baked look so that it looks like a cupcake. I'm using the same browns to color some of my items chocolate. When it comes to the items that your cupcake is decorated with, there isn't a really like a right or a wrong way to do it. This one I did so that there was kind of like a horizontal center highlight. This one over here, and it can be very challenging to color around items. So this one over here, it made more sense because the hearts were in the center, to do a vertical center highlight. So that is what I did on this one. If this cupcake existed in real life, would both of those highlights exist at the same time? Only if we had multiple light sources, but I'm not worried about it. For my little candy straws and my lollipop, I am doing the shading with the same white that we use, with the same grays really, that we used for the bottom so that it doesn't blend in to those warm grays. And we do those first because if we did the purple first or the violet first, then we would pick up those darker colors with our lighter colors and kind of smear them around, which we don't want. So that is why we do all of the, you know, quote unquote white shading first. I know it looks very gray right now, but typical with any coloring that I do when I'm coloring something white, just hang tight. By the time we get to the end, they will look white. So I did mine in rainbow color. That's another thing that I would, you know, highly recommend so that it doesn't get boring and monotonous doing the same thing, is switching up your color palette. You certainly don't have to do rainbows, but rainbows make me happy, and so that's why I chose that. For all of the cupcakes, except for one. No, did I go back? I might have gone back and nope, it is. It's the green and yellow one. For all of them except for that one, red is my accent color because it is Valentine's Day. And so they're all going to be their matching color to their background. So this one will be purple and red. The next one will be I don't even know what the next one is because I colored these so long ago. So now here, I knew I wanted to make the cupcake holder red. This is going, you know, this is going on the red card. So I'm going with my mid-tone. This is an R35, and I'm just coloring right over it. You could absolutely leave it like this because that gray shading you can still see through. I like a bolder contrast. I like a bit of a darker color. So I am going to go back in with my reds and just go over this cupcake holder again. So now you've seen the coloring of it twice. From here on out, I'm not really going to leave it in because you have already seen it, and we're coloring 6 cupcakes. And so the frostings and the toppers are all different. And, the cupcake colors are maybe different. So that is why when you see, and the ones in the future, you're not going to see the coloring of the cupcake wrapper. If you want to see the coloring of the cupcake wrapper, you got to come back to these two. And then after that, so they don't look like they're floating in air. Again, I'm using the cool grays, and I'm just adding really just a little ground, just a little shadow underneath them, starting with the C5, C3, and then blending out with the C1. And this just helps so they don't look like they're floating. This is going to be our vanilla cupcake. And again, I'm still in the E50s family. I'm just on the much lighter side of it, but all of the shading is still going to be the same. Lots of shading underneath the frosting, little dots of color where the wrapper kind of sinks in, and then the mid-tone, and then the lightest color throughout the middle. And then once I have that shading down, I will go back in and do my stippling. It's not going to be as apparent because these colors are much lighter as it is with the dark chocolate cupcake that we just did, but in real life you can see it, and it does make a difference. For this one, I am doing chocolate frosting, which ironically, so every year for my kid's birthday, I always do, and I think I told you guys this, I always do cupcakes and I mix them up. So I do 24 chocolate, 24 vanilla, and then I mix up the frosting. So it'll be 12 chocolate on chocolate, 12 chocolate with vanilla frosting, 12 vanilla and vanilla, 12 vanilla with chocolate frosting. The mixed ones never go. Like, I will have so many vanilla cupcakes with chocolate frosting left over, and I like the chocolate and chocolate, so I don't want anything to do with those cupcakes. But we almost always end up with, like, the next 2 days, that's what we're eating for dessert after dinner, because we just have so many of them left over. But I think I told you, from here on out, I'm only chocolate and chocolate and vanilla. Those are your 2 choices, peeps. So for this frosting, lots of little curves going on, which is great. Gives us a great opportunity to do a ton of dimension. The ribbons that you see that are on top, you want those to be your lightest color. And because we're coloring this chocolate, it's not really going to be that light. But an E55 is a mid-tone, but it is in comparison to the other colors. If you find that is too light, like I did here, I just went back in and did another layer of color and kind of extended out those deeper, darker chocolates, so that it would have more contrast. You never want to put down so much color that it's like bleeding out of your image. But if you're not happy with the way that it looks, you absolutely can go in and do another layer. And because Copics are buildable, you can lay them over top of each other, and even the same color will give you a darker color the next time. So this is my yellow one. I am doing more of like a golden yellow because it's got like this little star. That made sense to me. And so I am coloring my little star in my wrapper the same kind of golden yellow. And then the little chocolate on the right will be, in fact, chocolate colored, just like the frosting. And then again, I told you before, red will be my accent color. So Valentine's Day. What do you guys do for Valentine's Day? You celebrate Valentine's Day? We typically do not celebrate too much of the Valentine's Day. I usually get my kids a little something, and maybe I'll get my husband a card, but that's pretty much the extent of it. We call them Hallmark holidays, and we don't typically celebrate them. Just like Ohio, I think it's only an Ohio thing. In October, they have a thing called Sweetest Day. We don't do that neither. But I do have Valentine's for my kids. For Peanuts school class Valentines, he did tell me that I could make them if I wanted to, which is so ironic because this is the one year that, like, I don't really have time to make them. But am I going to do it? Yes, I am. I'll pull it out somehow. But the theme that I thought was really cute. I actually saw it I saw it on somebody else's Valentine on like Pinterest or something. And it said, hope your Valentine's Day is poppin'. So my kid super loves anything sour, like Warheads and stuff. So I found like Warhead Pop Rocks, which I thought would be very fitting for him. And it matches the little sentiment. So I am going with that. I'm going with that route. So let's talk about this cupcake because this is very funny. So when I looked at this, remember how I told you they have all of the colorings on the back of the packaging? I did not look at that because I am my own person and I just dive in and go for it. And what had happened was I colored this to look like a watermelon. And the whole time I was thinking, why would anybody want a watermelon cupcake? That doesn't even sound good. And I love watermelon. Like, that doesn't even sound like two things that would go together. That'd be like a cantaloupe watermelon or a cantaloupe cupcake or a honeydew cupcake. Like, these two things do not mix. Why would like watermelon in dessert? Sure. But in a cake? Negative. Like with frosting? No. And so, but that's what it looked like to me. It looked like a little slice of watermelon. And so that's how I colored it. Y'all, it's a lemon or a lime. It is not a watermelon. But here's me showing you how I colored it like a watermelon. So needless to say, after I got done coloring it like a watermelon, I happened to glance over at the packaging and see that they had colored it as a lemon. And I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Like, so much more sense. Plus, it's got like these little sprigs, like, you know, maybe like a little lemon rosemary cupcake, a little, you know, something. It ain't watermelon, y'all. It's not. That's not what it is. But I believe in showing you all of your options and all of the things that I do, whether they be right or wrong. So here is me showing it to you, even though I do not have to. And then I will also show you the redo, not the whole thing, because you've obviously seen the vast majority of it at this point. This frosting's super simple. It's just stacked on top of each other. But I did want to show you how I colored the lemon in case you are making your own and are trying to see how you would color that. So yeah. Oh, I did want to mention, Crafty Meraki, I do really enjoy their things, and I love the owner. She's so sweet and so kind, and so I love being able to support her. But they're actually having a new release, and there's some really, really beautiful floral dies in there, and some really great sentiment stamps and dies that are like on a larger scale. So if you have not checked that out, I would recommend. Here's my lemon and my watermelon. You tell me which one you like better. So for this one, this is going to be my blue one, and it's obviously a little berry theme, which is so cute. And so they have, honestly, if you're doing like the strawberry flowers, like flowers that grow on strawberries, are actually white. I colored mine blue because, again, I like chaos. I do what I want. But no, it matched my aesthetic much better. For these frostings, they're teardrop shaped, so I'm just following the lines that are there, adding a little bit of round shadows at the bottom to give them more dimension. And again, I am doing a chocolate cupcake. Honestly, I think this would be delicious with like a red velvet with like cream cheese frosting. Wouldn't that be so good? Oh, we were talking about what I'm doing for Valentine's Day. So yeah, so I do have intentions of doing that and making his little Valentines. Do you guys make Valentines? As I said previously, I used to make like little Halloween bags, color up a bunch of images, like the same all rainbow colors, and I would give them to the guys at work to take home to their kids. And then, as Peanut got older, I would do all of his, Valentines as well. My little jelly bean is still a little too little for that, but once she gets older and she'll let me do it, I will do them as well. And maybe it's just me. I think some people take comfort in making the same thing over and over again because each time it gets easier and each time you get faster, your work product typically gets better because you're practicing. But I get bored to tears. Like I cannot just make the same thing 100 times. But if I have to make the same thing over and over again, what I call, like doing it in bulk, I am very systematic and I do all of the things at the same time. First, it gives me a very organized way to make sure I'm getting all of the things done. So I will go through and like all of my bases for my cards, I did all of those. So I cut, scored, die cut all my bases. Then I cut all of my, my top arches, what you see here. Then I did all my stamping. Now I'm doing all my coloring. So that way, each step, there's like a light at the end of the tunnel for whatever the next step is. So if I'm doing something that I really don't enjoy, i.e. the die cutting is not something that I particularly enjoy, but I know then I can look for, like, I just have to get through this die cutting and then I can do the coloring, and the coloring is the super fun part, for me anyway, not for everybody. And I am coloring these up in my style, which is very involved. If you're doing multiples like this, you certainly don't have to color them this detailed in order to be happy with the result. You could just do a 1 and maybe 1-2 color blend, and they would still be really adorable if you're working with stamps that are super cute to begin with. So this one has lots of like layers because it's got this big swoop, lots of rounded edges. So again, going in, we still want it to look white. So we're not adding a huge amount of our darkest color, but we are going to add a little bit. Obviously, the pieces that are smaller or the pieces that are tucked up underneath the flowers are going to appear a little darker, where the ones that are up front that are larger are going to have a much larger expanse of white. They would catch more light than the ones that are, tucked up underneath there. And again, around the edges, just added like a little bit of a round, almost like a little comma shape, just to give them a little bit more dimension. Some people color for realism. That's not really my thing. Like, I want them to be accurate colors for the most part, but there are plenty of times where I take some liberties. So in doing these little flowers, I kind of forgot that I had an accent color I was trying to use, so I just colored them all orange, and then I realized, like, oh, there's nowhere for my little red to go. Thankfully, orange is lighter than red, so I was able to just go back in with the red and just go right over top of it, and nobody but me and you will be any wiser that I did not remember to color one of them red to start with. So I went in and got that middle one as well as the decoration underneath, and now I'm just doing the little accent leaves. But you can see once we put all that color around it, that frosting really does look white with some highlight areas versus looking gray when there is no other color around it. And then this one is the purple one. It's probably a toss-up between this one and the blue one being my favorite. I just like the little decorations of the cupcakes, I think, the best. This is super cute. It's got little cherries, little hearts. Like, it's great for Valentine's Day. This set, obviously, can also be used for any kind of birthday. You could do like a slimline card and line them all up together. I just think it's a really versatile set. Here, I'm going super heavy with my darks. I want this to be a like really dark chocolate kind of frosting, whereas the one we did before was probably similar to like a milk chocolate kind of frosting. And I also, for this one, switched over to the 25 family. So it is a slightly different shade of brown. It's a bit richer. It's not as warm, and then I will do my hearts purple and my cherries red. The leaves obviously will be the same green that we've been using, and the base of the cupcake will also be purple. Now this one, you kind of get to see the base of a cupcake a little bit because I colored them all together. So I just worked through my dark all the way through, worked through my mid-tone all the way through, worked through my light all the way through. I find that if I'm coloring not for the camera, if I'm coloring just for myself, that is usually the way that I do color. Is to just not, again, it's the same thing as if I'm doing something in bulk. Like I just find it best to just knock it all out at the same time. But typically if I'm coloring for the camera, I usually try to finish one item before I move on to the next. So that way you guys don't have to watch me do it 2 or 3 times because there's only so many hours in the day. But yeah, really, really like this one. I think it's super fun. Plus, like the colors work well together, which is really no big surprise because red and green are complementary colors. And then throwing in like a purple is pretty close to a split complement. So like, yeah, no big shock. The colors work nicely together. I think they're super pretty. And that purple is just, I don't know, it's purpling. And normally I'm not even a big fan of purple, but here we are. So once that is done, this will be the last coloring of the cupcake. I will show you all of them together before we move on to the detail pieces. So here they are, Roy G. Biv. All of them together. I think they're really, really cute. No regrets on choosing these, this set to do them. Now, you can skip any of these, do any of these, do all of these, whatever works for you. The clear glitter pen is something that's so fast and easy because it dries almost instantly. So I added that to a couple of things. The white gel pen, again, adding in just some highlights. Here, I'm doing highlights on the cupcake wrappers. I'm not pressing the marker all the way down and I'm letting it skip. And this creates just some kind of organic highlights along the edges of the cupcake wrapper as if they were metallic. Also adding some highlights to the decorations because obviously we want them to shine. They are, one of the more interesting things going on in the cupcakes. So I went through, added all of my white highlights. Here's what we're looking like. And then the last 2 things that I am going to do, you can absolutely wait until the end to do this because you have to wait for it to dry, but I'm going to let it dry while I do my sentiments. So here I'm using some glossy accents. I'm adding that to, just whatever I feel like. Like sometimes it's the sprinkles I'm adding it to. Sometimes it's the candies I'm adding it to. Sometimes it's the little straws, just go with your heart. For the areas that I did not add glossy accents to, I am going in and adding in some Stardust stickles. These are my favorite stickles because they take on the color of whatever is behind it. So they always are matchy, which I really do like. Not everybody does, but I do. So I am glittering up all of the things. And again, like if glitter's not for you, it's cool. Just skip it. Glossy accents, you don't like it, that's okay. So for the front covers, I have just picked out some colored cardstock. If you don't have colored cardstock, you absolutely could ink up some with your distress inks or whatever color kind of inks you have. I'm using the same size arch that I used for the front of the card base, and I've cut these all out of their colored cardstock. Now I'm going to use this. This is just a repeat pattern, and this is one of the ones that I have from Crafty Meraki that's just kind of like a general pattern. Again, you can use whatever you want. If you don't have a stencil, use a background stamp. Anything just to add some interest to the background, just to help them look a little less plain. And I'm using a paper pouncer from Picket Fence Studios and my Versamark. The reason I'm using the Versamark instead of the same color to create tone on tone is because I can then pick up the stencil. You can see the tone on tone there. And I won't have to clean the stencil in between each time. So that's something else I would recommend if you're doing it in bulk. Try to find something that's a universal neutral. So in my case, I'm using the Versamark, which is just clear ink, so I can just keep going, without having to clean anything off. I would stamp in Versamark if I was using a background stamp. Another option is a white pigment ink or black. Black is also an option. Anything that you can just stick with the same color. Trying to do all of the colors is just going to create a ton of cleanup, which we don't want. Here is the next tip, which is stamping your sentiments. Now, I'm going to heat emboss mine. You don't have to do that. You can absolutely, just stamp them on white and trim them out. I am treating with my anti-static tool. I'm going to stamp it in white pigment ink. But see how in my MISTI, my paper is positioned in the top left corner? This is going to allow me to stamp it, and I stamp them twice because I feel like that gives me the best result. And then I'm going to move them about 1/4 of an inch down because I'm going to cut these into strips. And then I can stamp my next one. And this way I can just keep going and stamping the same sentiment without having to stop, reposition everything. I normally, when I'm heat embossing, I like to stamp and I like to emboss right away. I don't like to wait. But in this case, because it went really quickly, and you can see, like, as I'm going, I'm just like quickly double checking it. I was able to do, I think 3 or 4. And then it's 3. The answer is 3. I would stop. I would put on my embossing powder. I'm using white detail embossing powder. And then I'm heat setting that. Then I can put it back into my MISTI, continue stamping my sentiments in the same fashion, and then trim them all out at one time because they're all lined up. So once I have them all done, like I said, I can just line them up in here, figure out where they need to go because all of my Y's are in the same spot. And then I'll just be able to trim them out into like a square, if you will, and then just run through and trim them. Now, I am not going by measurements. I'm going by sight. My particular trimmer has a wire in it, so it'll show me where I'm cutting every time. So I am double checking to make sure that I'm not cutting through my letters or something like that. And then just trimming them all out. Now we're onto the building. You can see, again, we are all organized at the top there. So I have my backer that needs to go onto my card base. For this, you want to line it up with the folded edge, because if for some reason you're slightly off and you need to trim it, you can't trim it on the folded side. You can only trim it on the open side. So you want to line up your edge on the folded side so that way if for some reason it doesn't line up, you can trim it on the outside edge. Then I grab its coordinating cupcake, glue that down, and then the sentiment as well. And then they're done. Like, that's it. That's the whole little mini. I think that they came out really, really, really cute. I cannot use these for peanuts because I got the whole what's poppin' thing. But I do think that they're pretty adorable. So I'll just, save them, and I don't know, maybe I'll use them for jelly bean one day. But yeah, so everything the same, just every time going through, it does really, like, the assembly line goes really fast once everything is done. So it really doesn't take too long. If you're like me, and maybe you're not, maybe you like to make the same thing over and over again, which is fine. All of those bulk tips are still good, even if you're making the same thing over and over again. I just can't. I cannot bring myself to do it. I would be interested to know, like, what kind of person are you? Do you like to make multiples of the same thing, or do you like to make things that are similar but different? Similar but different. And then this is the last one. The little purple one is the last one. I thought about putting like rhinestones or something on them, and ultimately I decided that I wasn't going to do that, because if I chose to give them to like jelly beans, like kindergartners or something, like I don't want anybody putting anything in their mouth or whatever. So this is just all of them all together, and that's it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time. I hope this was helpful to you, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.